Hello, welcome everyone. It's a real pleasure to welcome you all to this panel discussion. It's now widely appreciated that blue foods or aquatic foods are expected to play an increasingly important role in the future of food security. We've just heard that the Blue Food Assessment is in fact the first concerted effort rooted in rigorous science to systematically analyze the assumptions, trade-offs, opportunities, and challenges associated with integrating blue foods into the food systems. It's worth re-emphasizing that the Blue Food Assessment encompasses the diversity of blue food itself, as well as the blue food actors across the food system and around the world. And we will be discussing all of this and more during our panel today. It is exactly this type of rigorous, inclusive, and data-driven analysis that should guide policymaking decisions and their implementations in the food system, but of course, beyond it also. It is really a privilege for me to be moderating this panel, which will be focusing on the role of blue foods in creating healthier, more sustainable, and more equitable food systems, and how this type of assessment can help guide priorities for policymakers. I am Magdalena Skipper, Editor-in-Chief of Nature, a scientific journal which today is publishing key peer-reviewed findings of the Blue Food Assessment. With me, I have a group of impressive panelists with a wide range of expertise, and in alphabetical order, they are Raul Socrates Banzuela, former leader of PAKISAMA, a small-scale fishers confederation in the Philippines. João Campari, head of the WWF Food Programme and chair of UN Food System Summit Action Track 3. Masanori Miyahara, advisor to the Minister of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries in Japan. And Shakuntala Thilsted, WorldFish researcher and this year's winner of World Food Prize. Welcome to all of you. So let me start with my questions by directing one to you, Shakuntala. You have been a true pioneer in growing our understanding of how important blue foods are for nutrition. Why is it important to include and integrate blue foods into policymaking?
Already in your first sentences, you touched upon what is fundamental. That is the diversity. For far too long, the role of aquatic foods and aquatic food systems have been largely ignored in narratives for ensuring global food and nutrition security. Up to now, we consider fish, and at that, only a few species, such as salmon, tuna, trout, and tilapia. Now we know that we must acknowledge and make use of the diverse aquatic foods, including low trophic species such as bivalves, mollusks, and seaweeds, in order to get the full benefit of diverse aquatic foods for nourishing people. These aquatic foods are superfoods due to their large concentrations of highly bioavailable multiple micronutrients and essential fatty acids. They must be valued by policymakers for human and national development and included in national and subnational food-based dietary guidelines, of course, taking into consideration context and culture.
Thank you very much. It's incredible how your response illustrates the diverse ways in which placing emphasis on blue aquatic foods can make a difference. There are many things for the policymakers to turn their attention to. Would you say there are some specific important priorities, if you were to prioritize amongst the things you've listed?
Well, I do think the first thing I would like policymakers to get a hold on is to acknowledge the value of aquatic foods for human development and national development beyond trade and beyond economic value. If you would look at the nutritional and health benefits, that goes beyond this generation and it's intergenerational and of extremely importance to national development. So if we would get that understanding, then of course we can get policy change so that aquatic foods are included in the transformation of food, land, and water systems that we are calling for in the UN Food System Summit.
Excellent point, a very important point, which makes me want to turn to João now. It is striking that when we talk about food systems and food security, all too often still today, we focus on agriculture, agribusiness, and land-based systems. And of course, for years, you have worked to address the challenges of agriculture and livestock production. And now you are a key lead in the run-up to the UN Food Systems Summit. So what is it that has made you become interested in blue aquatic foods?
Thank you, Magdalena. Delighted to be here. Hello, colleagues. First of all, let me start with a reflection that 75% of our calories come from 12 plants and 5 animals. And aquatic and blue foods, including fish, is not in this mix. Okay, that's surprising. And that's what started to attract my attention to blue foods. Our heavy reliance on the few foods from land is not good for human health or planetary health. And the evidence is pretty clear. We all know that terrestrial food production systems are overexploiting nature. They've caused about 70% of biodiversity loss on land, 80% of deforestation, and have led to the degradation of 52% of existing farmland. As population growth continues, if we don't change what we eat and how much food we waste, we will need to produce approximately 50% more calories to feed everyone in 2050. If we keep relying on terrestrial systems to the same extent as we have been, we'll either have to convert more land or intensify production on existing land, which will probably lead to further degradation, considering the current production methods that rely on chemicals to improve yields. We can, of course, adopt nature-positive production practices like agroecology or regenerative agriculture to restore and maintain soil health. But terrestrial systems in many places have already reached tipping points, serious ones. In short, I find it very foolish to think that we can feed a growing population with foods that is mostly produced on land, when we can also rely on the vastness of our oceans, rivers, and lakes, and their resources to sustainably diversify our diets. This is even more so when we consider the need to reduce our intake of red meat and dairy, of course, in places where they are overconsumed according to health guidelines, in order to reduce the carbon and methane footprints of food systems. We can therefore expect the demand for aquatic foods to increase. I'm also interested because we can't treat our waters the same way we have historically treated our lands. So there are important lessons to be shared between land and aquatic food systems.
That's really, really important to hear. And I wonder, Shakuntala, whether you can make a comment on this, because while at the moment all eyes are on the Food Systems Summit, of course, these discussions happen in other contexts and they will continue beyond the summit. So how do you see the blue foods within the sort of broader setting of international discussions around the food systems?
If I should give an example from where I work. So I work at WorldFish, which is one of the entities of the one CGIAR. And this year, the CGIAR is celebrating its 50th anniversary. And we have a new strategy. And within the vision and mission of the one CGIAR, it's clearly written transformation of food, land, and water systems in the climate crisis. So there is, on paper, the words to support this movement. Now we have to move to the actions and the investments and not only by the CGIAR, but most importantly by the member states of where we work and where aquatic foods are an important part of local diets, of livelihoods, and of culture.
Thank you, Shakuntala. Some very important points, and of course, congratulations on a wonderful anniversary. So João mentioned something pertaining to the way we extract our food from the aquatic systems. And that brings me to turn to you, Soc. There has been a lot of attention on industrial fisheries, but what of small producers? What is their role?
Well, small fishers will be playing a major role in addressing poverty, environmental protection, and taking care basically um, of the communities around from which they operate industrial fisheries, while they produce the bulk of fish products in our domestic and foreign markets. At the same time, they wreak havoc to the environment to a large extent, and they poach to the waters of small fishers communities as we speak. Here in the Philippines, we are an archipelago of 7,500 islands. We have 928 municipalities with 2 million small fishers as we speak. Some 3,000 big commercial fishing vessels are operating and poaching in these municipal waters, and 1 hour operation of commercial fishing vessels would mean some 6 months of hunger of coastal municipalities. One half of our 2 million fishers live below poverty line, and largely because of this poaching of by commercial fishers or industrial fishers into the municipal waters already allocated to them by law. No? So much of our problem is about governance, and the solution from which we've operated over the past 35 years of federation is basically strengthening the organizations of these small-scale fishers. And if they are so organized, they would be able to secure their tenurial rights over their municipal waters, and they're able to drive away those poachers. And in our study, just in one case study, in 1 year protection of their municipal waters, they were able to double their income. Now, this is a case study in one municipality. So here it was already very clear. If you want to address poverty, just implement the existing law of giving already, the fishers have already 15 kilometers seaward. That's already allocated to them by law. You only need to enforce that. Enforcement means already a big deal. Incentives in terms of laws, in terms of financing, in terms of education, agri-extension, all of this would be needed. No, as of now, less than 10% of our 2 million fishers are organized. And so how can government partner with and mobilize fishers to protect the environment and increase their capacity to lift themselves from poverty? So investment in organization is key. Thank you.
These are really important points. And of course, with your intervention, you bringing this very important social justice dimension to the conversation, and also remind us, I think sometimes we think in too centralized way that it's always on the shoulders of the governments, but actually now you're saying that it's the empowerment and incentivization of organization of small scale actors, really important points. And of course, you began by talking about this tension between the large-scale fishing operations and the small-scale fishers. So I wanted to turn to Masa now. Over the past several decades, we've seen fishers, in fact, fan out ever more across the globe. So what are the challenges that you see for ocean fisheries in the coming decades? And again, I am going to ask about your opinion about the role of the government and, of course, the role of the industry, because that's where it really comes to play.
You see, I have been working to contain so-called IUU fishing, illegal fishing activities on the high seas. But I'm now becoming a bit desperate, because you see, I worked for the IUU fishing for tuna species early 2000, and then now we are facing the IUU fishing of squid, and you see one species after another. So you see, it's very difficult. I think it's almost impossible to control properly the high sea fishing activities at present. So you see, probably my proposal could be a bit audacious or too challenging. But you see, I'd like to close high sea fishing area, except for very well controlled activities only. And for example, you see, many high sea fishing fleets use the high sea area as a base for the poaching into the 200-mile zone. And in particular, in the coastal, developing coastal states having tremendous difficulties to enforce their authorities, their management to those poachers. And I think, you see, it's time to consider a reverse. We should stop high sea fishing activities unless they are controlled properly. Then we should help developing coastal states. They don't have enough capacity to enforce their laws and regulations to their 200-mile zone. Then we have to enhance their capacity. That's a better way to ensure the sustainability of fish resources all over the world. We have to think it globally, and we have to establish this new principle. Otherwise, it's almost impossible. We are making the same mistake again and again for the last 20, 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you for this, and thank you for being audacious. I think the time to be audacious is now. Very interesting proposal. I'm going to ask the panelists to briefly comment on this. I'm of course very interested by this combined proposal of empowering coastal states, because I'm thinking that possibly SOC will see this as an opportunity to introduce governance around fishing in a much more equitable way on a larger scale, but locally, but of course including small scale fishers. So would you like to react to this comment?
Just 6 years ago, our government enacted an amendment to our 1998 Fisheries Code precisely to help eliminate and deter illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. So it's all about governance. But even now, the data that we have is so alarming. So many commercial fishing vessels continue to encroach to the municipal waters. So much of the work really is about governance. But again, in areas where there are very strong organizations of fishers, they're able to help implement the law and push government to implement a law which some of them may not be amenable at implementing because of vested interest and what have you. But again, the central message I have is we will be able to address a lot of problems if we are able to invest more in strengthening the organizations of small-scale fishers at various levels and put all the necessary resources, human resource, finance resource, legal resources in this effort at scaling up organizations of small fishers. Thank you.
Thank you, Sok. Shakuntala, what are your thoughts about this proposal?
Thank you, Magdalena. There are 2 points I'd like to raise. Prohibition and stopping of illegal activities. Also, change in the incentives. That's fine to stop harmful activities or harmful activities that are not beneficial to all people. But at the same time, there should be activities that support, as Sok is saying. You have to support across the board. That support has to also reach to the small-scale producers, the coastal population. There must be equity. Just stopping some illegal activities doesn't get you to an important, better place. It's then promoting and supporting better activities and the capacity of the people to do so, and the communities and the organizations. So you need activities on both sides, on the prohibition, but also on the encouragement and support, or else we aren't going to get there. The other point I want to make is, yes, we focus a lot on marine fisheries. That's extremely important, but we must remember that aquatic foods come from many different sources, from marine, from inland waters. Just take the Great Lakes of Africa, how important they are in Africa. And as João rightly mentioned, that when we think about sources of aquatic foods, we think about the route from production. We must also look very importantly at the route from reducing loss and waste.
Absolutely. João, do you have a comment, maybe some lessons from the land, or perhaps some things to avoid that have happened in that context?
Thanks, Magdalena. Yes, I do. It's interesting to talk to colleagues in this panel because I can see some parallel issues from land-based food systems. Let's talk about small farmers, for example. They are responsible for about 80% of our plate, right? And they are generally also great environmental stewards, but they are the ones that are least supported. They are the ones that do not have the enabling conditions for them to succeed, generally because they don't have collateral, for example, to obtain credit, and they want to. So, you know, financial institutions alongside governments have a role to play here, a strong role to play. You know, one is to create the enabling conditions for small-scale farmers and fishers, as we're talking, to succeed. You know, they need to de-risk credit for them, you know, and so that they can continue to do the right thing. And I see this parallel very strongly emerging from this panel. So it feels to me that small-scale fishers, as small-scale farmers, are the ones that need most of the support, and they are the ones that receive least attention. We need to change that. At the UN Food System Summit, we are discussing ways to do this as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Masa, last word from you before we bring the panel to a close.
I'd like to raise another aspect, you see, climate change. And I think coastal small-scale fishery is more vulnerable to that change. And I think, you see, the role of science is not only just analyze the climate change, the impact on the fish, but also they should, you see, offer alternatives, you see, for the production by the small-scale fishers. For example, now we are facing the change of the species even around Japan. The western part of Japan was famous for the production of oyster, but now ocean is becoming too warm for the oyster production. Then we have to find out alternative species for the coastal fishermen to rely upon. So that type of, you see, enhance the resilience of the coastal small-scale fishermen. It's another role of the science too, I think. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's been an incredible discussion. We touched on so many different aspects, illustrating that, of course, the blue foods, aquatic foods, are so diverse. It's a very diverse set of ecosystems, very diverse set of problems, including, we touched very importantly on issues of social justice and governance. Of course, all of these have to come together. From my perspective as an editor of a scientific journal, of course, what's particularly rewarding is that we're having this conversation in the context of robust science which helps us analyze the facts and lead us into the future, inform our policy and decision making so that we can look forward towards more equitable and much more sustainable food systems. I would like to thank very much our panelists and thank you for your attention. Thank you.